So then we are back with more understandings from the renewed covenant. And this renewed covenant is from the time and place where we are then reminding ourselves of the covenant with Abraham. And then these manuscripts came from the original manuscripts of the prophets of Yahweh, indicating us then the time of the end. And it's valid reminding ourselves of the many mistakes in the Torah also. And some of them are related with the covenant. Many times then when the nation went into exile, their manuscripts became torn apart, became destroyed by the invading forces. And then later when they returned to the land, they had to restart the entire scripture from scratch. So then you can understand when these people, they were returning, they thought as they were returning to the land, so they would make a new covenant with Yahweh. But in fact, they were simply reminding themselves of the covenant with Abraham. So when you read then the Torah and you come then the parts of the prophets where you find then relation with the explanation extras of the Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, then you find precisely it's not a new covenant, but then the covenant with Abraham. So then we find ourselves during the time of restoration, because we are explaining then the areas of the 23rd chapter of Leviticus, the spring feast and autumn feast, and those are then the relation with the time of the earth and then prophecy. Later many of the prophets, they came and they pointed the people back to the instructions where then they would understand then later the oracles and the explanations, and then also the area where the Messiah explained what the Torah truly meant, himself as being the living Torah. So when you are reading then the Torah, you are not reading only a manuscript, but you are reading a person. Many people don't understand this factor yet because they always relate writing separated from a person. However, when you are then reading the Torah or any portion of the Hebraic deity of Yahweh, the true creator, you are speaking of a creator and not a manuscript. So you can't make your own understandings of the scripture of a person. You have to understand how the person is via himself. So then there is not a new covenant, but the covenant with Abraham. So then these times where we find then the extras given by Yirmiyahu as he was pointing the people back to the instructions, so then they would understand in the future what it meant. Leviticus the 23rd chapter, and the first section is the spring feast. So the first tabernacle service then was pointing the people to the instruction related with the completion of the spring feast. Later then the Messiah would be in charge of the Holy of Holies and would direct the people then towards the second portion of the Torah, the autumn feast. We find ourselves during the time of restoration, where then reduction from 2031 plus then the restoration of the holy cities are simultaneously taking place. As we understand, our president is a Muslim. There is no hang back, there is no lie. He is a Muslim. He has his personal choice of being a Muslim and should be respected. Our president is not a Christian, neither Jewish, neither Hebraic or any other religion. His religion of personal preference is Islam. That's his religion. And as any person with a preference, best preference of religion should be respected. So then, there are in these end of times only couple of situations going on as far as religion is concerned. A person has only two choices when the person understands the true creator, not invented junkies. Christianity does not exist. It was a concocted religion. As any other religions, it was concocted. You have only a couple of choices. Either you are then from Islam, or you are from then the branch of Yitzhak. Either you are then from the first son, or then the second son. As we understand, there are only a couple of sons that came from Abraham's loins, where then we find either the Arabs or then the Hebrews. You don't have any other choice. Christianity was a make-up because of the 1,000 years of the rulership of Nahashatan. He invented it. It is then a concocted Messiah and does not exist. You can't find a Messiah outside of the Holy Tabernacles. It is unheard of. The whole plan of the Messiah, he was very specific when he said, whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe, these do and observe. You can't remove the tabernacle when the Messiah told his people to observe what Moses told them to observe. What was simply completed was the sacrifices. Yet, whatsoever was done in the tabernacle must remain. The demands of the law. Those who were satisfied with his son, however, brought the son then into the Holy of Holies, where he would direct in person then the people in exchange for sacrifices. So you have to have the Holy of Holies. You have to have an exchange, because then Yahweh was in the Holy of Holies and he demanded a death in case of sin. There was no choice. And he gave a list of what to do when sin was then evident. When his son had taken over himself as being Yahweh, the facet of the Son, he gave his son then the leadership of the second tabernacle services, but there was a deal with it. The Messiah, the Son, had to be in his place in the Holy of Holies. So then Christianity is a ridiculous section of religion that removes the Son from the Holy of Holies. It is absolutely demonic. Doesn't exist. So then the whole section of Christianity of the Greco country and the Roman country and what they believe concocted is absolutely a pure lie. Either you are then from the branch of Ishmael, Islam, or you are from Yitzhak. There is no other religion. When you are speaking of the creator of the heavens and the earth, and the stars, and the planets, the true person that was, is, and is to come, you have only two choices. Either you are then of Islam, or you are of the Hebraic line. And the future is going to show you very clearly what is coming in terms of your choice of religion. Christianity does not exist and is winning. It's going truly to be abolished, because never existed. So there are only a couple of choices. And our president, he is Muslim. He is from Islam. He did bow down to the king of Arabia when he visited him. He is a subject of the Muslim faith. We must come to this conclusion and must then receive and respect his leadership as a Muslim rulership. He's a Muslim. So then the very core of decision making is always bounding down to the Muslim faith. Whatsoever decision he makes is in line with the Muslim faith. Though we understand our president was not born in the USA, he was born in Kenya. Then he went to the island of Hawaii, and there they forged his birth certificate. He simply had a document that would make him there with the identification for the time he was on the island. But he was born outside of the United States. And obviously his presidential campaign was unconstitutional because he is not an US born person. However, since it's only a piece of paper and he wants then to do the best for our country, so then he began to evaluate then what are the choices in the future, because Islam is taking over our country. There is no question. People can fight, they can do whatsoever they want. Islam is coming and is staying. The other choice and the counterbalance is making sure then of the side of Yitzhak, then the holy city is returned. Or the president has to give up his Muslim faith in exchange for the old junkies of the Republicans. He has no choice, because the Creator has already established only a couple of ramifications from Abraham, and the world must be in line with either of them. He has only a couple of choices. If he wants to stay with Islam, then he has to push for the holy city's site finding and then the city built. So maintains then the Hebraic people, scoundrels as they are, because they want power in the world, via then the time of the seat. Because Israel at the moment is not obedient to the first covenant, neither the second covenant. Speaking of the covenant with Abraham, because they are one. So then, either of those you have to make a choice. Because the covenant that was made with Abraham, it is the covenant of the first service and the second service. But then you have to understand the change of leadership. Yahweh was in charge of the first tabernacle service. He came then in person to establish the second tabernacle service, and then places his son in his stead in the Holy of Holies. Tabernacles must remain. The only reason why he didn't for 1,000 years, because it was given to Nahashtan 1,000 years for himself to try, then to deceive the nations, and he could not. Ended in 2008, and then early 09, then ended his rulership of 1,000 years. Then, in an instant, we entered then the restoration time and the reduction from 2031. So our president has no choice. If he wants to remain a Muslim, he has to push for the holy city. If he does not find the holy city, he has to give up his Islam. Because as president of our nation, the Jewish people are not going to let Islam take over our country. And he has to force himself to relinquish his faith in exchange for power of the government. There is no choice. Because he is involved already with a covenant with Abraham. So either way he has, because what he has in Islam is simply a ramification from the first son of Abraham. Maybe he didn't think of it. Ishmael was the first son of Abraham. That's the faith of the Islamic people, from the ramification of the first son of Abraham. So in part, then our president is part of the covenant, but only through the first son. But in order for him to continue in it, he has then to give up what he believes, because if he doesn't push for the holy city's site finding and the construction of the holy city as per instructions, then he has to give up his faith in Islam. Because the Jewish people of our country, he's not going to let him go forward with his faith. Because our economy is already broken. He has already purchased the war with Israel in Gaza. The war was purchased. Our president gave money to the Israelites to end the war. So they fought the war, and we paid for them to stop the war. While our country is in a big trouble. We are in crisis. We are not privatizing as we should. We are spending more. And our economy is not recovering. And we understand our economy won't recover without privatization in a systematic way of making sure every agency, we get rid of those, only maintains the secret services in FEMA, and then we invest very properly in our infrastructure, more power plants, creating more jobs, and then making sure our government remains lean, and then making strong partnership with China. The influence of the president regarding the Chinese government won't work. The reason why it's because then in Revelation you find, or then the Autumn Feast writings, you find precisely the third part of the ships, and the country in charge of it is China. So the mixing of our president with the Asian countries won't work. Because our president is trying then to become a part of a era where then he is from the ramification of Ishmael through Islam, but China has its own religion. So he is truly stuck. And China already voiced it out. They don't want bilateral understandings. They want then individual basis by basis, or then country by country, resolving the problems with China, indicating already the strength of the Holy Scriptures. At the end, the China country is going to lead the market. It's on the Scripture. Read it. But the problem is, if our president reads the Quran rather than the Holy Scripture of Yahweh, then he's in the wrong direction. Because then the revelations and the oracles completion are from the ramification of Isaac, not Ishmael. So either he then pushes for the finding of the holy site, and then the holy city is built, so then he can go ahead with his plan. Because the only then part that's going to be a problem for his government is going to be then the understanding of China being the leadership and not Islam. The only way for this system to work is then acknowledging the Chinese leadership worldwide. Because if he subdues the Chinese, then he is subduing Isaac's lineage. Works against the prophecy. Doesn't work. If he doesn't do any, then he has to confirm his own inability of governing the country, because he already started not being a U.S. citizen. Then he has to make a compromise and then being a Republican. Because the ultimate understanding, when he gets what he wants, is going to come down to religion. What he believes or not believes, the driving force. So then he thought if he would purchase the war, give more money to Israel for their own war games, then he would make themselves unavailable, and then would not intrude in his own plans. The problem is, Then he's infiltrating himself with the Asians, and the Asian market is directly guided by China. And as we understand, if the Chinese only snaps a finger and does not give to us the regular products, then we are expired the next day because we owe them a lot. Our market is taken over by Chinese market. We can't produce anymore the way we used to produce in the past. So then the understanding is our president is taking actions without having a strong industry to back up his decisions. But rather he is only counting with the printing machine and giving money to get his way, but then we have only short of 4 years to get the market and our economy lined up in level, so then we can do more trade in the future, or then we face a crisis of economical proportions where we won't be able to recover. Our president was born in Kenya. He is not a U.S. citizen. But then, he's a nice person if he understands the predicament our country is at and begins to work for its growth and its development, then it's on a piece of paper. However, he is mixing himself with the Asians without having industry to back him up. It's going to be mere empty words. Because the only point of the Chinese is only don't send any more products to the U.S. and then the U.S. is bankrupt. We don't have any more industry. But then place these situations aside and let's verify what the scripture then is giving us. What's the direction? Well, first we understand we are during the time of restoration and the reduction of time. We understand that there is a city that must be found, its site must be found, and a city must be built. If our president wants to have his way, he wants to make sure his presidentship would stay intact, then he has to push for the holy city, because then he has then a scriptural background, so then he understands the purpose of the actions of the Hebrews. Otherwise, he has to give up his faith and be subjected to the Hebrews. And in our country, Islam is not going to be very prominent, while Hebrews are then the most influential. It's a very tight situation. Not in this country. This country then is yet ruled by Jewish. If our president thinks he can change to Islam, he is absolutely mistaken. The only event that can give him or the president his way of doing what he wants is by having the holy city's site found and the holy city built. Then he can have his way. Because he absolutely then removes the hindrance of Jewish influence in our country and directs them to the Torah as per the instructions of what to do as per Yahweh's instructions. Then the president would have the forward motion. Without these, he has to relinquish his faith and return to our country, work our problems in our own country, and then he has to become a Republican. He won't be able to go on with Islam. So he has to make a choice of what to do. Please stay tuned, much more coming up.